This podcast is supported by patrons. You can find a full list of them in the description of this episode. Hello, listeners and viewers of Good Morning BSS World podcast. This is Wiktor, Doktor, and today we are moving to Africa. And to be more precise, we are moving to Cairo, to Egypt, to have a very interesting discussion about building business bridges between Egypt and Europe. And I am not here alone. Today with me there is Hans and JT, and they will introduce to you themselves. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Victor, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about what we believe is an exciting subject. My name is Hans Henrik. I'm the CEO of Crossworkers. We are originally a Danish company, but have been running our operation out of Cairo in Egypt for more than 15 years now.
Thank you. And my name is Jan-Hendri Tromp. I'm an executive in a company called SoluGrowth. Originally a South African company that's also expanded its footprint into Egypt, into Cairo, and servicing clients now from both those locations. So very excited to speak to you today as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, gentlemen. So it looks like that Egypt has connected Denmark and South Africa.
You could say so.
No, absolutely. I think Egypt is such an interesting location from many aspects, but I guess geographically, it's a fantastic place to be in. It's close to Europe. It's close to Asia. It is part of Africa and the Middle East at the same time. So there's lots happening in Egypt.
Hans Henrik, I will come to you with one question. So you mentioned that Crossworkers, the company you are leading, is originally from Denmark. You have built this bridge with Egypt, with Cairo. How did it start, actually? How did you notice the potential for your business actually to go to Africa, to the North Africa, to Egypt, and to do this, what you are doing at the moment?
Yeah, it's I come with a background where before I worked with Crossworkers and established that company. I was working in another IT company in Denmark, and we were working closely with operations in Pakistan and Ukraine. And then I had the opportunity to start Crossworkers. And I had a look at, of course, the markets that I knew, Pakistan, Ukraine, but found that prices were bound to increase drastically in Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe basically have the same demography as West Europe has. So therefore, I did not look further towards Ukraine at that time. Pakistan, also a nice location actually, very different from India, but in my opinion, the wrong time zone. So it's the travel distance and the time zone was, in my mind, a challenge. And then I basically looked at the map, and the funny thing, being here together with JT and also forming a strong strategical partnership now with the SoluGrowth. But I actually looked at South Africa and Egypt, one of the two, because of the time zone. And the choice at that point was Cairo. So it's a simple analyze based on, of course, a lot of knowledge about what is important when you choose operation location for an operation like this, both on the short term and on the long term.
And to be honest, I am not surprised because this Egyptian location for most of the European businesses is like one of the first natural steps to focus on. Of course, there is also Morocco, there is Tunisia, and there is Cairo as this northern bank of Africa, yeah, the Mediterranean Sea, I would say, part, and this is the very natural way, especially of the language skills as well, yeah. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Egypt is one of those countries in Africa where you can easily find speaking people who do not only speak English but also some other languages.
That is correct. Egypt is a natural gateway to both Africa and also to the Middle East region, and has been that for a long time. And on top of that, you have a large number of people concentrated in Cairo alone, and of course Egypt as a whole. But there's also the cultural dimension in Cairo, and that is that Cairo has been used to having a lot of international trade going on. There's a lot of people working abroad, coming back and forth. There's a large tourism industry, so that bridges the cultural understanding between Europe and Egypt quite well. And as you rightfully say, there's a lot of linguistic skills in Cairo. You can find English speaking, German speaking, Italian speaking, of course, Arabic speaking, which is also relevant for people or companies with operations in Arab speaking countries. And you basically have everything in one pot, so to say. So you're absolutely right about the language skills, but I also want to emphasize the cultural understanding and what I call the cultural readiness.
Absolutely, and I think also to add on, so I think just the empathy levels as well. When we considered Egypt as a delivery location, there was quite a good cultural affinity between South Africa and Egypt, and there's always been a cultural affinity with South Africa and Europe as well. So I just felt that it's a easy opportunity for us to explore. I think the empathy levels is really high in Egypt, and it's also a very hardworking nation. Languages for sure. There's over 16 languages that can be that's been spoken in Egypt, and that is also why we have the customer care side of our business to expand exactly in Egypt.
So let's focus on Egypt now as a BPO GBS location. So how big is it? What's the potential of this location, and which parts of the world are being serviced from Cairo, from Egypt?
If you look at the size of the country, it's 110, 120 million people. If you look at the two largest cities, you reach almost 40 million people. That's half of Germany's size in a few cities. Um, the talent pool is enormous. We estimate that it's around 500,000 graduates from universities. Alone in IT, it's around 50,000 a year. So there's a lot of talent pool to dig into, and use in an operation like this. And there's some natural bonds. Normally, you say that something like 1/4 of the Egyptian GDP comes from people sending money back. They're working abroad. So that's primarily in the Middle East, but it's also in the US, it's in Europe, it's different places in Africa and so forth. So there's a natural connection to those places already. And especially for Europe, this is a very straightforward idea to look towards Egypt and Cairo to gain access to skills.
1/4 of GDP?
Yeah,
Huge.
traditional. Yeah, but it's just to emphasize that Egypt and Egyptians are very international. They actually work internationally, and that just gives that cultural understanding that I was talking about before. That you really get a really good feeling of things because there's a huge interaction and so forth.
Absolutely. I mean, having come to Egypt, having been there for a year and a half now as well, looking at the schools, the number of international schools that's available, German international, American international, UK international, and more, Nordic international schools. There's more than 50 universities, more than 200 institutions, so they are definitely focusing on education, which is absolutely the right the track that they are on. And they've got government institutions that's really supporting industry. They've got the institution called ITIDA, which is the Information Technology Development Agency. That actually helps with skills development, but also provide incentives to BPS companies like ourselves, and they kind of support the industry quite heavily as well. So it's very exciting to be here and to actually see what's happening in the country and how fast it is actually growing, and the services that they can provide.
JT, I have a question for you. You are representing a BPO industry, providing a range of services to international clients. Which markets do you support from Egypt?
So from Egypt specifically, the European market is quite interesting, but also the US market. I think that is where we see a lot of growth that's going to come. You would say that the time zone is an issue between Egypt and the US, but you will see when you are in Egypt how many United States captive organizations is there. Like PepsiCo, there's a number of them that's operating, around the clock. Egypt never sleeps. Cairo never sleeps, for sure. So you can go out any time of day and night. There's a lot of people in the streets, a lot of things happening. So they really do work 24/7, and can do, follow the sun type of strategy is really available in Egypt as well. So definitely Europe is strong. We've had also Asian, companies come to us asking for services. GCC, of course. I mean, Egypt is known for GCC country support, but Europe very interesting, especially I think the German companies that are really very interested in Egypt as a destination that I've seen in the last couple of months. That's growing quite significantly. So yes, so you can really it's a blank canvas for you when you're in Egypt. There's a lot of countries you can support.
And do you see any differences in types of services which are being provided, for example, to GCC, to Europe, or to US?
Yes, I think the main one is customer call center services. That is quite a big contributor for sure, just because of the language capabilities that's available. And I think IT is fantastic. It's quite big as well, and Hans can speak more about the IT side of it. But definitely, just as I said, the investment that the government and are making into the IT skills is starting to show. There's a vast variety of IT skills available in Egypt. So for me, the main ones is really customer care and IT that I've seen. Finance and accounting is good, but I don't think I don't think that is the main one. So I would stick to those two as the main services. Yeah.
Hans, will you confirm that?
Yeah, but definitely. All sort of IT, and that's of course my primary focus. All sorts of IT are being delivered, whether it's to the US or to Europe or to the GCC area, and that has to do with the capability of Egyptian employees. The universities are good. Quite a lot of international universities. And there's basically no skill that we can't find. And then of course the number of people. We've been fairly strategical in building up a large database on people whom we actually have the phone number and the email and the CV on. And I think we're very very close, if not past 30,000 in that database. And that it's just an enormous figure compared to if you look at some of the needs that we see in Europe. How much do we actually need? So that is definitely an answer to the lack of skills which we see in Europe. There's no doubt about that. And then a work day or work week for an Egyptian, and if you look at the vacation days and all these things, then you actually get somewhere between 1 to 1.5 man month more production out of Egypt compared to, for instance, a country like my own Denmark.
Wow. That's a huge time benefit.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Hans Henrik, 500,000 graduates every year, 50,000 IT graduates per year. How long does it take to recruit IT team in Egypt?
Well, we normally for quite a number of years we've had a standard that we would recruit the skills we need within 2 months. Our recruitment department just recently came and said, well, let's only stick with the 2 months for the difficult skills, and then try and raise the bar and go for 1 month on average skills. So it's a whole different picture than what you and I see in both West and East Europe. It's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, Europe usually takes between 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
And customer care is exactly the same. It's usually a month. So, we rather under promise and over deliver, but it can be done absolutely in a month.
Okay, so now we know already which markets are being served from Egypt. We already know that the most popular services are CX and IT. And what industries actually are being supported from Egypt? Do you see any specific industries which are leading to work with the BPOs or IT companies based in Egypt?
Well, maybe if I can start, JT. If we look at some of the large logos here, then ITEDA, which JT just mentioned before, have done a tremendous job in attracting some of the large corporations. So we see Amazon, we see SAP, we see IBM, Microsoft, you name it. They're all here. They basically seen the light in Egypt. We also see the possibility for quite a lot of smaller companies. We have to remember that the backbone of Europe is small and medium-sized companies, and they are basically the ones facing the challenges the most by trying to attract talent, because of course they have sometimes less to offer than large corporations. So there's definitely a solution for the smaller and medium-sized companies to work with Egypt. I would advise to work through a vendor, because then you can focus on your business, and you can focus on getting production out of it, instead of focusing on establishing yourself in Egypt. But that is of course also a possibility that the smaller companies can do that.
Yeah, I would add and say, anything that's got to do with the customer, from a call center perspective or from a CX perspective, so retail being quite big, financial services, including insurance, is a big one as well. And then obviously telecommunications is big in Egypt. The skills in telecoms is huge. Having Vodafone, Orange, Etisalat, those big names already here that's been in Egypt for many years, and many people have worked in those industries. So even from a higher end perspective, you can get great skills in that industry for sure.
I know that this question may be like leading you to some kind of a subjective point of view, but I will ask it anyway. How, from your perspective, these BPO activities are growing in the line of time in Egypt? If we could just make a step back, like the last 5 years and the current situation, how do you see that the market is growing?
So I have not been in Egypt that long. So I haven't been in Egypt in 5 years. So I can only comment, I guess, in the last 2 years. There's a lot of new players coming into the markets, the like of Aon. So we have seen companies being set up in the last 2 years. The likes of Deloitte. Deloitte was originally audit in Egypt. They have opened up a whole leg to really supporting the IT industry. IT industry for Deloitte. So they would provide services to Deloitte Europe. So they don't even service the Egyptian market itself, because they don't have the capacity. So there's quite a lot of there's quite a big number of these type of companies that I've seen entered only in the last 2 years, which is a very, very good sign.
And maybe adding to that, I also see some companies move. One thing is moving from Egypt or from Europe to Egypt, but there's also companies basically moving operations which are now being done in, for instance, India or other countries, and moving them closer to Europe. And I think it's something that came out of COVID, that we basically want to have things closer to home, and in that sense, Egypt is a whole lot closer than somewhere in India. Not saying that they cannot perform in India; they can definitely do that, but it's just difficult to change the location, right?
Yeah, this nearshoring trend is seen everywhere. Yeah, we want to have business partners closer to the destinations where we are.
Exactly, but just adding, because many people see Egypt as an offshore location. It's actually nearshore, time-wise, travel-wise. It's a 4-hour flight from Berlin, and that makes it nearshore. So it's a totally different perspective, actually.
This is also something what not everyone is aware, that Egypt is the same or nearly the same time zone as the rest of the Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a surprise. Anyway, talking about home and about this area, what's the preferable type of work of employees in Egypt? Is it like in Europe that we are working in a hybrid model, so few days in the office, few days at homes, or maybe there is a different approach that everyone comes to office or everyone works at home? What's your opinion?
Oh, that you're touching on a sensitive point there, Victor.
I do my best.
Yeah, I think that the if we look at that, and that of course that's all a reminiscence from COVID. The tendency I actually see now in Europe is that people are getting back in the office. There is a delay, to say more or less, on that here in Egypt. There is still a lot of people who would like to work from home. Um, that being said, there's also a lot of the people that we are hiring, for instance, who have been working at home, been working in a hybrid model, and are running away screaming because they lack the company of colleagues and better working conditions and so forth. And then one of the things I've been doing before I did Crossworkers was I actually worked with HR. As I see it, the only thing that binds a company together, that's the culture, that's the company culture. And if everybody's working from home, it's not a culture. Then it's just somebody invoicing somebody, and it might work for a while, but in the long run, we need colleagues to improve ourselves, to get ideas, to strengthen our social network and so forth. So in my opinion, work from the office is there to stay. We have a flexibility in our side, but the main place of work is definitely the office. And on top of that, just one final point to that. On top of that, we you basically also need to get inspired and so forth with what you do, and also having an operation which is working on the distance to the actual customer. You have to have a strong culture, near shore, offshore, wherever it is.
JT?
No, I fully agree with you, Hans. Couldn't have said it better. I think it's directly also linked to attrition rates. So if you want to be a company, it's about your protecting your brand, and people actually need to want to work with your company. So how do you do that when people are remote? It's really difficult. So it's really important to create a sense of belonging to those individuals, a career plan, progression. Those kind of things is quite important. And you struggle to get that right if people are working from home because they don't collaborate the same way that they would being in the office. So we definitely also see that there's actually people are looking to have more that formalized structure again in their lives after COVID, and they do actually long for being part of something bigger. So I fully agree with Hans on that point.
You don't have to convince me that working from the office is much better for the business. I am a big fan actually of returns to the office, and I hope it will. Okay, I'm not a fool, and I don't believe that this is going like it was before pandemics. But I am keeping my fingers crossed actually to make it more presence in the office spaces where those people talk to each other, interact, and share their ideas, and are in line with the company culture, as you mentioned, Hans Henrik. Talking about collaboration, your both companies are cooperating between each other.
Yes.
Yep.
How did it happen?
Like everything, it happened in Lisbon.
In Lisbon. So we are now
No,
talking about Denmark, South
yeah.
Africa, Egypt, and now Lisbon is on the play.
I ran into a guy who worked for SoluGrowth when I was at a conference in Lisbon years ago, and heard that SoluGrowth was on the way to get to Cairo, and that is basically our approach always when there are good companies, good people, and so forth who are interested in Cairo and Egypt. We tend to help them, not as a business part, but as a favor. So we reached out, and then we started the dialogue, and that kind of built up over time. And the result now is what I believe is a very strong strategical partnership between the two companies, where both companies actually gain quite a lot on that partnership.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, just to add, it was exactly that way. We immediately hit it off. Met Hans and Fuad, who's his business partner, about 3 years back in Egypt, and they absolutely convinced me that this is the right place to be at. And there was no strings attached. I think that's just the way that our companies work together. Is that there was nothing in it for them to assist me in Egypt at that point in time, but just to get our company going. Once we got that, then we started actually looking at collaboration opportunities, and we found that we are a perfect fit. It's a perfect storm for us. And it was actually an easy discussion because we knew that this will just elevate both companies to greater heights. So it was a no-brainer, and I'm glad that it's now come to its fulfillment, and we can now just mobilize everything.
So, Hans Henrik, it sounds to me that you work like an ambassador of Egypt.
You become an ambassador because I normally say I'm Danish, but when I go to Cairo, my heart pump Egyptian blood. You fall in love with the country, its people, lots of things that can be improved and so forth. But the only thing we can improve that is basically by doing business together, injecting currency into the country, and everybody benefits from that. And of course, there's such a big potential in Egypt. There's such a big potential for what we're doing. So why be super protective about it? Why not help and support others who basically need to enter into a country like Cairo? And we actually took it that step further now, where we, as a kind of a side service to what we're doing, we're actually utilizing our knowledge and skills on Egypt and knowledge about Europe as well. So we're offering companies who are not in IT or whatever, but without looking towards what they're producing or what services they have, that we actually have an offer to help and support them so that they can come into to the country in an easier way. They can chip in on an office seat, have a good working place, and so forth, and then we can help them as they grow if they want to grow. So that's basically also an answer to your question. That yes, I definitely think that we should support and help other companies entering into Egypt, and yeah, it's a long answer, but given the whole interest focus from Europe on Africa, on some of the major cities and countries in Africa, I know for Denmark we made a whole new African strategy. Egypt and Cairo is one of our main embassies in Africa. The other one is in South Africa, right? So it makes sense that entering into the African continent through either South Africa or from Egypt.
JT, I have the last but one question to you. But looking sometime in the future, how do you think your business will grow within the next 2 3 years in Cairo?
Oof. I think it's going to grow substantially. I think you can see I'm grey, so the worst part is over. The first 2 years is really the hardest in setting up. Hans can tell you that. We've had many conversations on this. So for me, it's really exciting because now it's just mobilizing and really getting to the markets and actually explaining them the story. Explaining to people the story about how Egypt can support their initiatives. There's a massive skills shortage in Europe. Everybody knows that, and it can really be. Egypt can really play an integral part in actually, solving for it. But I do think that the Egypt story hasn't been told to the large extent in Europe and in the UK the way it should. So I think that awareness, it's on us to bring that awareness to the European countries to say, you know what, have you considered Egypt? Have you looked at what's happening in Egypt? This could potentially solve your problems. And as Hans said, it's near shore, so you're not far away from your delivery center. South Africa is a totally different story. It's far shore, and a lot of clients, don't like to be so far from their delivery centers. That is the truth of it. So Egypt's very well placed to grow exponentially. So I've got big plans, and hopefully that they will come true.
I will be looking forward to see how the business is growing, especially that Africa as such is growing a lot. There are some calculations that within the next 5 years there will be over 1 million people working in Africa as such in the BPO and GBS industry. So those are huge plans. Africa is the youngest continent wherever we put into consideration what's the population of any continent worldwide. Yeah, so it creates huge opportunities, and of course Cairo and Egypt is the location which is becoming more and more popular and more recognized. So this what you mentioned, JT. Yeah, I think that still there is a lot of work to be done to make this awareness to be put in the front of a number of companies, but it is already happening and moving forward. If somebody wanted to get more information about Egypt or Cairo or about your businesses, where would you recommend such people to go for more information?
Well, obviously, I think both JT's and my phones are open for business or just a plain advice. Catch us through our websites, either crossworkers.com or SoluGrowth site, and I'm sure that we will get connected pretty fast. People are more than welcome to ask questions and get good advice.
Absolutely, fully agree. And I wanted to add as well, we are a BPO, but we don't charge for everything. So, so
Because
some,
you are
some,
not consultants,
no,
such
we're not
typical
consultants.
ones.
We are not consultants. So we give a lot of free advice as well. And that's just based on execution. So yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out on any of the platforms to us. I prefer LinkedIn personally. I think it's a great platform to connect with me. And I do check that quite regularly.
JT, Hans Henrik, thank you very, very much for today's talk. I really enjoyed it. I made plenty of notes in here with valuable information which you have shared with me. And I keep my fingers crossed for Cairo and Egypt to grow as the BPO destination and the service delivery hub, because this is how it is being seen more and more. So thank you very much, and I will make sure to add all of those links which you mentioned to the description of today's show. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it,
very
Victor.
much, Victor.
Thank you for
Appreciate your
talking.
time.